Hey, I'll be tying a gray eagle D-fly today. The hook I use is a Gullet Supreme blind eye long D shank, so it's a long shanked hook that was developed for the D-fly. And first step you gotta do is tie in the gut eye. It's a silkworm gut. It's the traditional eye they used on these hooks. It's a, like I said, it's a twisted gut. I shaped the eye, make a little loop in it. So I'm gonna tie it into the bottom of the shank of the hook. Leave yourself just like a 1/16 of an inch on of hook point sticking out, and just wrap it in good and tight. And then next you're going to wrap side by side wraps to the point of the hook. You wrap back to the point of your hook is where these flies start, and everything travels forward from there. Next step, we're going to take a small oval tinsel, and we're going to tie it in at the 6 o'clock position or the bottom of the hook. Then we're going to wrap back forward about a 1/2 inch. And this is called the tag on these flies. So what we're doing is making the tag. We're going to wrap the tinsel side by side. The first wrap of the tinsel should always be on a bare hook and locked in, so that way it never slips. And then we're going to come right forward side by side, keep them pushed up tight. And we'll tie out with one wrap, roll it. And then next process will be a tail. Tail on the flies, the red breast feather off of a golden pheasant. So you get the breast feather out, and we're going to strip that feather, all strip it down to where it looks about like that. And then I wax my thread really good at this point where I can make nice soft loops without losing wraps. I use a beeswax that I melt down and then I freeze it in a ice cube trays. And we're going to lay that feather where it curves up to the check it and make sure it's centered down the hook. To keep everything small on my flies, 3 wraps of thread will hold anything to keep it from falling out. So I just take 3 wraps because when I tie my next thing, it's going to be more and more, and eventually I'm going to use a ostrich herl for what's called a butt. And when you're tying with ostrich herl, tying butts in, the herl itself is a kind of concave, and then it's slick on one side. So to tie it in, you tie it in on your side with the concave side up. So that way when you're wrapping it, you get the smooth side forward and that herl will stand up straight instead of just flaring out and going everywhere. Just looks a little nicer. Get your butt tied in. Now trim that excess. And this fly's got double ribs on it. And so the first rib tied in on a fly should be the first one out when you rib. And we start these ribs at 6 o'clock. So the first rib is a medium oval tinsel, a little larger. And the purpose of this rib is to protect the hackling when a fish struck. It wasn't tearing your hackle up. And the second rib is a flat silver tinsel. I like the French Plis tinsel myself. It gives it just a little nicer look than a satin finish tinsel. But you'll tie it in next to the oval rib on the far side away from you, to where it looks like that. It's on the far side. It'll be the second rib out. I'm going to secure these ribs a little bit. On floss bodies, I'd never do this, but because I'm going to go forward. But where we're using a seal dubbing body, it kind of covers that up. And then our next step is yellow seal dubbing. And a lot of people use dubbing loops and stuff, but this stuff is super hard to dub. And if you use a dubbing loop, you create way too much bulk in them. So the way I do it is I just start my dubbing and start twisting it and get it just kind of over the thread pretty good. And so all I'm going to do is take a wrap and pull it back and down until you get it really woolly, and then twist some more. And then you pick the excess out. We got to do a third of the body with this yellow seal dubbing. And then the original fly called for eagle feathers, which, as everybody knows, in the United States we can't use real eagle. So I got my hands on some gray Marabou, and then a real eagle feather that has got brown tips to it, so I dyed the tips brown on them for a sub for eagle. And the way I do it is just find the tip, and I tie it in at the tip of the feather, and I'm gonna create my V here. I'm gonna tie this in on the far side of my shank, but towards the top. Get it tied in good and secure. Trim the excess. Get it hanging back. Then I'm gonna wrap back to my yellow dubbing. And then we're gonna dub the next third with a light blue seal dubbing. I'm gonna do the next third of the body, same as the yellow. The idea is to try to get a nice blend to your yellow without like obvious gaps. And pick the excess off. going to take a scarlet seal dubbing, do the same thing for the last third. And you have pull that seal dubbing back really good. Lock it down to try to keep it out of your head area. And then I'm going to want to brush this out really good. Just get it webby. Now we have to start ribbing the fly. So we're going to try to keep our marabou out of the way. On traditional flies, they use 5 ribs, 5 wraps of the ribs. I don't know why, but that's tradition, so I try to stay at it. So we're going to take 1 wrap through the yellow. So it's going to be a pretty long wrap. And then our second wrap needs to come right in front of the marabou we tied in, like splitting the yellow and the blue. And then you're going to come up and get another wrap through the blue. Third one, then we're going to split the blue and the red for our 4th rib, and our 5th rib's going to come right through the middle of the red. And we're going to tie this rib off at the bottom of the shank of the hook. I just take 1 turn to hold it and look and make sure they're all even. And then the second rib, the flat rib, is going to flow on the front side or the eye side of the hook, butted right up to the oval thread that tinsel we just wrapped. When I cut my ribbing off, I leave it long on purpose because I've had too many of them come unwrapped and then you kind of start all over. So I leave it that way on purpose until I get everything locked down. And then we're gonna pick up our Marabou and we're gonna follow this rib that comes out in the blue. So we're gonna take it and follow behind that oval tinsel. And once I get past oval tinsel, I'm gonna take one more wrap over where the hook deal in, and I'm gonna trap it as many of the fibers as I can with my thread. Once I get it secured, then I'm gonna cut everything off, holding my thread with my finger out of the way. Hold it all back. And the next step, I'm gonna take a gadwall to throat it, the fly. So I take a piece of gadwall and I'm just gonna strip it back and open it up good. I'm gonna strip my excess off. So it calls for 2 turns of gadwall, so I'm gonna just strip it back and I'll lock it in my finger like that, and then I'm gonna stroke it down to give it where everything's kind of going back. And then I'll bring it So anyway, we get the gadwall tied in. It's a throat or a keel on a fly. So what you want to do is you want to pull them gadwall fibers straight down. Once you get them down, lick your fingers a little bit and start stroking them down. And then the trick I like to use is to shape them. I take my hackle pliers. I'm gonna open them up and pinch that. I'm gonna let it hang, and I shape my feather to where it's got some flow to it with that, and I'm gonna let that dry for 3 or 4 minutes, and it's gonna hold that whole thing in place. And the idea behind it was a keel to keep that fly riding straight up and down in the water when they swam it. And while I'm letting that dry, I'm gonna prepare my wing material, which is a golden turkey tail. And so when I have them tails, as you can see, we got long reaches or long slips here, and you want to take off the long slip side, and so it takes 2, so you got to match them up, figure out where you're going to cut your slips out of. And on my slips, I like to on D-flies take about 10 fibers. I don't count them, but it's approximately 10. So I'm going to prepare my and we're going to cut our second slip off. When I take our hackle pliers off, that should stay right in place. You got a wild one, just pluck it off. Get our thread waxed good. When you're looking at the slip of the wing, you can see a angle at the top. You got a long end and a short end, and the long end is tied in to the inside of the fly, or the inside of the wing, so it'd be the far side to me. And what I'm going to do is these wings are tied in flat, or fairly flat, and they go right to the bend of the hook is the length of the wing you should use. So I'll roll my vise. I'm going to pinch that wing to the center of the hook, and I'm going to take a soft loop around it, and I'm going to pull away from me gently. And I'm going to roll that fiber back. Lock it in. So I get it where I want it, then I'm gonna take my second wing. Get it the same length as the first one. Take a soft loop. Get them to where they're riding up there. When you get them tied in, you want them V. You don't want your V to overlap. You want them to butt up. That's what the wings should look like on them. Once you get it all tied in and secured, then gently start trimming the reaches there. And where I tie with white thread, I take a Sharpie and just run it up my thread until my thread turns black. I just start building my head, covering up all the fiber. So I wrap forward and then wrap back to my starting spot. And just put a good half inch in it. Tie it off, and then I use it's called glass bead head cement. It's made in Denmark. A friend of mine sends it to me, and I finish the heads. It sets up just like a glass bead. It looks nice when it's set up. And that's the finished fly.